My answer would be true both for newspapers and for broadcast, which is that the last thing you mentioned, economic viability, is the key to everything else. Only journalism organizations, newspapers, television stations that are economically independent, economically strong, can be independent. The most important thing for a news organization to be is independent, so that it can report without slanting, without being influenced, what the powers in a country are doing. One of the wonderful things, the important things that a news organization should do is to serve as a check on people in power, whether that's economic power, government power, military power. So that would be the first thing that I would do, would be to find a way to make sure that my news organization was economically vibrant. And then I would look for really smart journalists who are committed to telling the truth, who are themselves independent, not aligned with any faction, and who want the best for their country, and the way they want to achieve the best for their country is to tell the people what is happening.
Now, based on your experience, do you feel that that kind of approach is permeating into any third world countries right now?
There is a great variation in my experience. And even within particular countries, there's a great variation. I'm more familiar with Latin America than other places. In Latin America, sometimes there's very independent journalism, but it's often being done by people who are part of the power structure, and there's a conflict that happens. My sense is that's not always what's happening in African countries, but it is in some. It's in countries where the media is controlled by the government, like Zimbabwe. I know that it's very difficult for independent journalists to actually get their story out. So there are successes in some places and failures in others.
So do you feel like a place like China, the progress that's going on there is tied into the media organizations there?
What is going on in China is very interesting, because China, unlike any country in Africa, unlike any country in Latin America, has been a very centrally dominated society and government. That the government, the Communist Party, has controlled everything and is planned in a central way. But as it's trying to advance economically, it's had to have more economic freedom, and that has brought a demand and almost a necessity for media freedom. But China still has extraordinarily strong restrictions on media. Almost all of it's still owned by the government. All the major portions are. It can't be owned by anybody outside of China. And there are constant dust-ups between journalists and the government there. So China is moving towards press freedom as part of its move towards economic strength, but it's certainly not there yet.
Okay. So do you feel like journalists in a place like Africa, specifically Zambia, which is a neighbor to Zimbabwe, and their things are much better, journalists there should report every authority law infringement except for the presidency? And I ask this because usually the top of the country is where most victimization happens. So do you feel, just to protect the flow of news, they should report more vehemently on the rest of the political structure than the presidency?
I believe that journalists should report most acutely and with the most strength on the institutions that are the most powerful. And if that means the presidency, then they should report strongly on the presidency. And the reason for that is that that it doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't do any good to expose corruption, let's say, at a very minor level, which is causing not much problem, if there is someone at the very top of the government who is corrupt and is causing there are great abuses. It's tougher to take on the most powerful person. I certainly agree with that. But I think that that's what everybody should be looking at, because those are when there's an abuse of power, when there's abuse of power by a food inspector, that's one thing. If there's an abuse of power by a general or by the president, that has the capacity, the potential to cause much more damage. So I think that that's where the attention should be paid. It isn't always paid, I know that. It isn't always paid in this country. But that's where I think that good journalism should go.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and we hope to put most of what you've said into practice, because our next mission is to try and make a difference in Africa. And your advice will be well heeded.
I wish you every bit of success. One of the things that I really care a lot about, even though I'm not knowledgeable, but I care a lot about the quality of journalism in Africa, because I think that the peoples in the various countries of Africa deserve good journalism. They deserve to know what's going on in their government. They deserve to be told what's happening by journalists who are independent, which means being paid enough, by the way. You can't be, one of the great problems throughout the world of having independent journalists is if the reporters are not paid enough, then they're tempted to be bribed, or they don't have enough, they have to take another job, or they have to do all the things that keep them from being the best journalists they can. So I think that's a very, very important part.
Okay. We're working on that, and hopefully with the help of good people like you, we'll be able to make this work.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.